Today I thought I'd mix it up and play devil's advocate. With Halo Infinite's recent reveal and the clear desire to bring back the series' classic art style, many are taking it as a chance that the franchise as a whole will be returning to its roots and that we may finally see a classic Halo game from 343. But with this commentary, I'm going to discuss why a classic Halo from 343 might be bad. Now, if you go down in the comments section of this video or Reddit or wherever it's posted and you see people saying things like, wow, this guy has been asking for a classic Halo game for years and now that 343 might actually give him what he wants, he still complains about it. This just proves that some people complain no matter what. If you see that, you will know immediately that they didn't watch. Because first of all, I still don't think we're getting a classic Halo. I think Infinite will feature some form of mobility mechanics, and secondly, this is not necessarily a complaint or criticism. It is more so a response to certain sentiments I have seen circulating in the Halo community. And it is also me being honest about a potential classic game if we ever get one. An acknowledgement that if that game ever happened, there is a chance it might not be good. It is not an easy road to success. I often see people simplify what Halo needs to do to return to glory. All we need to do is remove Spartan Abilities and the game would be great. All we need is the old art style and music back and then hashtag we back. All we need is more content at launch. Just remove Spartan Charge. Just remove Sprint. All of that sells Halo's predicament short. If you took a game built with the philosophies of Halo 5 and you built it around classic gameplay, built the maps at a proportional size for it, built the sandbox to be balanced for it, that game would fail. Because 343's philosophies towards game design thus far, I believe they would not lend themselves towards a good classic experience, and let me explain why. When you look at a game like Halo 5, its gameplay is its driving force. When you think of Halo 5's multiplayer component, what is the major thing that sticks out in your mind? What is the thing that you identify as being the biggest change or the biggest addition? It's movement. It's the Spartan abilities, and their impact is very large. And when you see fans of the current Halo titles argue against a classic experience, what is their number one argument? Halo has to evolve. Halo has to do new things, and the single most impactful way of adding new things to a game is through base mechanics. It is the single easiest way of showing your players new things and for them to identify what's different from game to game. The Spartan abilities have a huge impact and are clearly new. Any player can pick up the controller and click the left bumper and go, oh, you can thrust now. Any player can press a button and go, oh, you can slide, or hover in mid-air, or perform a ground pound. The game's biggest innovations are targeted at the area that is most easy for players to identify. If you were to strip 343's Halo of those mechanics and instead offer these simple mechanics of the original series, that burden of innovation now has to be transferred to aspects of the rest of the game. Aspects that are harder for players to immediately identify. So while I disagree that Halo's original mechanics can't survive in a modern market, I can understand where some people are coming from, because those original mechanics are admittedly very simple. They alone cannot hold up the entire experience. Were 343 to attempt a classic style, then the depth, the variety, the burden of innovation would have to be made up for in some other aspect of the game. Aspects that 343 has not needed to excel in because it's always used Halo's gameplay as its avenue of innovation. The gameplay gave Halo 5 its variety and depth. It gave players agency and options, things to learn, things to master. And because, as we discussed, gameplay changes are inherent to the moment-to-moment experience, they are attached to the player and under their direct control, these dynamics are carried from match to match. 343 can lean on them throughout the entirety of the game, something that they can't do in a classic Halo. And thus the reason I'm concerned that a classic Halo from 343 would be bad, because they would have to design a game where the one design method, the one avenue of innovation in which they have relied on up until this point will be the one thing they cannot do. And all of the components that Halo 5's gameplay made less relevant will now be essential. Map design, sandbox design, these things can't just be competent in a classic Halo game, they have to be exceptional. They can't just be functional, they have to be innovative. They have to in and of themselves provide new experiences. Let me show you what I mean. I intend to release full featured commentaries on each of the following topics, but I will use this video as an introduction to these concepts as well as to illustrate my point on the topic at hand. Starting with map design. Halo 5's map design is not innovative, it is not special, it is functional. The maps act as canvases and variances of geometry on which the Halo 5 experience takes place. They accomplish very little more than that. They are not responsible for offering a new experience, they simply need to accommodate for the experience offered by the gameplay. Again, I know I'm being vague, but if you just look at the maps offered in Halo 5, they all, with only a few exceptions, adhere to a particular format. Coliseum, Stasis, Empire Truth, Tyrant, they may all have different geometry, but the style of gameplay they provide is very similar, and that's intentional and not necessarily even a bad thing in the context of Halo 5 because, as we stated, the depth and variety came from its base mechanics, and the maps were simply designed to highlight those mechanics. However, this is quite a bit different from Halo maps of old. When you look at the older Halo games, it also featured maps in this style. It had maps like Midship and the Pit, which are fairly simple competitive-oriented maps. But the old map design did much more than that. Let's just look at Halo 3 for all this. Hell, let's only look at its launch maps. You look at Narrows. It promotes linear aggression with a very unique layout taking place on a bridge with a man cannon flanking one side that shoots you across. The very next match, you could be playing High Ground, which plays like a beach assault. One team spawns on the beach with better weapon drops, but the other team spawns with a better position. This layout also creates really compelling one-sided objective mode, something Halo 5 is very much lacking in. Next thing you know, you're playing Sandtrap, a huge open map with a giant forerunner structure half buried in the middle of it. This map features a vehicle called the Elephant, which is essentially a mobile base that also carries the objective. This creates all kinds of interesting dynamics because the spawn point for an objective is not in a fixed position. Can you see the difference yet? Halo 5's maps support the experience. Old Halo maps define it. They are built to offer a scenario. What's it like to fight across a bridge? What's it like to attack a base from a beach landing? What's it like to fight for objectives on mobile player-controlled platforms? They are responsible for providing depth and variety. They are responsible for providing innovative new things for players to do. A classic Halo's map design has a burden of innovation on it, and it requires maps to be a strength, not just merely functional. Through map design, you can create unique encounters, unique mechanics. Each play space can offer something that Halo has never had before. And if 343 does indeed ever make a classic Halo, it will need to consider these things, and of course, that's not all. Like map design, sandbox design is another essential aspect of a classic Halo game. It is another avenue of innovation, and it too carries a burden of innovation. Again, a burden 343's Halo games have not had, at least not in the same way. You look at how 343 has designed Halo's weapons, and they are very iterative. In Halo 4, they released a completely new set of weapons for the new Promethean faction, and what were they? A Promethean shotgun, a Promethean SMG, a Promethean precision rifle, a Promethean sniper, all occupying the same role as weapons that currently exist, just with a few wrinkles like the scatter shot can bounce off surfaces or the light rifle gets more powerful when scoped in. Let me be clear. I do not think this is objectively bad, and I'm not even criticizing weapon balance here. I'm once again pointing out 343's philosophy when it comes to adding new pieces to the sandbox. They add things that are familiar, that players can easily identify and assume how these guns might work upon picking them up. When gameplay is your focus of change, you might be able to get away with this. But when gameplay, core mechanics, is the only thing you can't change, then your weapon sandbox becomes a vital component to introducing new mechanics and experiences into the game. You can attach mechanics to the weapons themselves, and that means each new weapon you create, once again, has the chance to offer something Halo has never had before. Truthfully, I think this is an aspect Bungie could have been better at as well. But I will discuss all of that in a standalone video where I plan on going over Halo sandboxes throughout the span of the entire franchise. But Bungie certainly had a lot of success. In Halo 3, we were introduced to the Gravity Hammer, and you look at what that weapon has done for the game as a whole. Its unique gravity manipulation mechanics have made it the focal point of countless fan-favorite game types, Griffball being the one that immediately sticks out in my mind. Same with the sword added in Halo 2. Think of the influence that weapon has had on the game as a whole. Games like Infection, one of the most popular modes in Halo's history, predominantly features the sword, and this is what I'm getting at. Iterative weapons can be fine. I'm not 100% against them. God knows Halo already had tons even before 343 took over. But in a classic Halo, when designing your sandbox, you need to think outside the box. You need to come up with things that have the potential to offer something new. Something that either fills a niche or role Halo's sandbox has never never offered before, or features unique mechanics that differentiate the weapon so that it offers unique gameplay opportunities and new strategies, and similar to the examples I just mentioned, might even spawn entirely new game modes and ways to play because of the functionality that it offers. Not to say 343 has never produced fun weapons. I really liked the sticky detonator, for instance, and I think the plasma caster in Halo 5 is pretty cool, and a few others. But I think as an overarching philosophy, it is pretty clear that 343 leans more towards iterative sandbox design, but a classic Halo, especially if you're going to make a new one, needs innovative sandbox design, and that goes for not just weapons, but vehicles and any item a player interacts with. And now we've come to the last point I want to make. I just mentioned a moment ago about how different unique weapons have allowed for the creation of fan-favorite unique game modes over the years. However, those modes couldn't exist without the abundance of custom game options and community features that defined the classic games. I've often referred to Halo's original gameplay formula as the glue that connects and supports all of the creative ideas you put around it. Its simplicity allows it to be modular and adaptable, and that allows a lot of freedom in the surrounding aspects of the game. This applies to the concepts we just talked about. It allows for a lot of freedom in map design. You can build basically any scenario you want around it. Same with sandbox design. You can attach whatever mechanics you want to your sandbox and then control the rate in which they are available. And it is because of this flexibility, this simplicity, that allows it to also be a perfect fit for allowing the community to have agency and do as they wish with it. It is in this aspect that I am the most conflicted when it comes to 343 attempting a classic Halo game. On one hand, they are responsible for features that would lend themselves extremely well to that style. They introduced the custom games browser to Halo 5 post-launch, and that has a lot of potential in regards to community interaction. The ability to play any custom game mode you want at any time. The ability to discover new modes and maps created by other players. The ability to share your own creations. I see that along with what the team has done with Forge. The amount of options available to the player. The types of things that are now possible for players to create. This not only serves as a fantastic feature for all of the creative types the community has, but now with an increased capacity to share, it benefits the community as a whole like never before. As Halo 5 has progressed in its life cycle, I have slowly become optimistic that these aspects are things that 343 have come to understand is very important. But I'm still conflicted, because the philosophy behind Halo 5 overall does not lend itself to how I believe a classic Halo should be built. It is not modular, it is not flexible, it is instead very separated. When building modes for a classic experience, the thing that should be on the forefront of your mind is how can we maximize the uses of this resource? How many different ways can we take a concept at its core and spread it out so that it gives our players as much variety as possible? And not just that, but how can we expand the resources we already have to create even more opportunities? Halo 5 didn't do this. It didn't add things in a modular way. For instance, Halo 5 added Breakout. What we have here is a distinct mode that is purpose-built, and it features forge maps, increased lethality, a neutral flag, elimination rules, and a few presentation elements like the man cannon entrance to start a round. 343 built this from the ground up as its own thing, its own game mode, but a classic Halo uses a different philosophy. A classic Halo would look at the pieces of Breakout and ask, does this already fit into an existing pocket of our Halo experience? Are there resources that we can maximize here? And there are. You could take Breakout and make it a capture the flag variant, using neutral flag as the starting point. Forge maps are pretty self-explanatory. You can even have the community make those for you. Increased lethality shouldn't be an issue. Halo's had damage modifiers in the past. Add a respawn toggle to the custom games options, and if you are insistent on some of the presentation aspects with the man cannon entrance, you can still do that. You can make that entire spawning system its own forge object. It can be categorized just as the starting spawn points and respawn points are. And there you go, you have Breakout. It didn't need to be its own thing because you can just take neutral flag and add the necessary toggles, many of which have existed in Halo before, and achieve the exact same thing but in a way that is more connected to the rest of your game, more modular, in a way that saves time and resources, and all of those features you added for the sake of Breakout's existence now get to benefit capture the flag as a whole. The mode itself gets all of those options for players to mess around with. It gets to benefit the rest rest of Halo's multiplayer suite. A few more examples, look at Strongholds. This is considered its own thing, a brand new mode, but it doesn't have to be. The only differentiating factor it has from 3 plots is majority control to score. You can literally just add a majority control to score toggle to the territories game mode. And there you go, you have Strongholds. But not only do you have Strongholds, you have the rest of the territory game modes as well, and have done nothing but add options to it. Warzone, I know I've said some of these things before, but they are great examples of my point. Warzone is considered its own thing. None of the other multiplayer modes have any functionality or compatibility with it. None of those maps or resources are shared with the rest of the game. You can't even forge on them. When you consider all of these things we've talked about today, I do not think it is unreasonable to be concerned about Halo Infinite if it is indeed a classic experience. Which I will reiterate for the record, I don't necessarily think it's going to be. But whether it's Infinite or a future game that attempts a classic style, I think it's important that we consider these things, that we acknowledge that a return to form will not be a simple task, and that simply removing things isn't going to get it done, and I'm afraid that is the perception that many people at 343 and fans of the current style have of those who want a traditional Halo game. So much emphasis gets put on what needs to be removed, what needs to go, and I think there is a commonly held perception that we just want something old. You hear it all the time, oh, they just want a Halo 2.5, oh, just go play the old games are still available, but that's really not what we want. And the reason I made this commentary today, as someone who has been very vocal about certain features being removed and who has been vocal about a return to a traditional style, it is important that we understand that that style will only work if the burden of innovation is adequately accounted for in the other aspects of the game. It needs to be a new game. It needs to be innovative, and it needs to do new things, just in a different way. 343 Halo games front-load the innovation in the aspect that is most easily identifiable to players in the base player-controlled mechanics, and thus the impact is felt and that sense of newness is made immediately apparent the second they pick up the controller. Well, a classic Halo is a bit different. You ever hear that phrase, death by 1,000 cuts? Well, it's like the opposite of that. It's like life and newness by 1,000 subtleties, a new game mode, a new custom game option, a new map that features a scenario Halo has never offered, with built-in mechanics that offer new and unique gameplay opportunities, new weapons that through their unique functionality create new gameplay opportunities as well, and in return inspire new modes entirely. Perhaps brand new features are introduced. Halo through the years has added Forge, Theater, Firefight, and several other large additions to the overall offering, and in a perfect world, those new offerings can be modular and contribute to the game as a whole, and not just be self-contained pockets of content. Again, I do not intend this to be a criticism. I'm simply pointing out that the philosophies 343 has applied to the Halo games they've created thus far would not lend themselves to a compelling traditional Halo experience. They are not made the same way, and it would not be a simple solution for them. It would not be an easy, guaranteed success. In fact, it would require a lot of hard work. It would require a lot of people to simultaneously switch directions, rethink their current processes and methods, and still somehow all manage to end up on the same page working towards a singular goal. The reality is, 343 has never made a game like this, and if they tried, it may very well end up being bad. I don't know that for sure. I'd actually like to see them try. I think it is indeed the best direction for the series and the direction they should be going in. But I'm also realistic about just how much of an undertaking such a thing would be. Because for 343 and a potential classic Halo, the burden of innovation is just as heavy as it's ever been, but now must be carried by things they've never had carry it before. Till next time.